Alright, everybody, see how we doing today? Okay, let's proceed. So, Reuters, this is an article, it says, very unhelpful. Ireland scolds British PM Johnson over Brexit. Ireland said on Friday that Prime Minister Boris Johnson's approach to Brexit was very unhelpful, and that the new British leader appeared set on a collision course with the European Union that would preclude an orderly exit with a deal. Well, let's hope so. Let's hope Ireland's full of hot air. It frequently is. Not saying anything bad about you Irish people, but sometimes your politicians are very, very, very full of hot air. Of course, I guess that would probably just be most politicians in general, wouldn't it? Such biting criticism from Ireland just 2 days since Johnson took office with a pledge to strike a new divorce deal with the EU indicates the perils of the Brexit gambit chosen by Britain's new government. On entering Downing Street on Wednesday, Johnson cautioned that if the EU refused to negotiate, then he would take Britain out on October 31st without a deal, a step that would send shockwaves through the world economy. In an indication of business concerns about a disorderly exit from the EU, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders said a no-deal Brexit was an existential threat to the British car industry and would risk output. Johnson spiced his pitch to the EU on Thursday by bluntly stating that one of the most hotly contested elements of the Brexit divorce agreement, the Irish border backstop, would have to be struck out of there if it was to be the Irish border backstop would have to be struck out of there was to be an orderly exit. Well, to be fair, the British automotive industry is already kind of fucked anyway because it was very dependent on Japanese support, and the Japanese withdrew over the Brexit deal. Now, I certainly hope that Johnson doesn't think he can strong-arm the EU. It's a very powerful entity, one that I promise to never ever stop speaking the truth about. It's clear despotism. But no one leader can stand up against it. That's crazy. It might even end up resembling Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran, only he can get away with that, whereas Boris Johnson pressuring the EU, the only one he's going to hurt is himself. That's like a little dwarf trying to take on a big giant, Shaquille O'Neal-sized person and end up getting injured. Trying to act all scary. Ireland's second most powerful politician, Foreign Minister Simon Coveney, said Johnson's comments were very unhelpful and warned that the new British leader was not going to get a deal with such an approach. He seems to have made a deliberate decision to set Britain on a collision course with the European Union and with Ireland in relation to the Brexit negotiations. Coveney told reporters in Belfast after meeting Julian Smith, Britain's Northern Ireland minister. Smith later said he did not think a collision was looming. We need to find solutions, particularly for the issue of the border. But the Prime Minister was very, very clear to his cabinet yesterday that he wants to get a deal done, he said. Further illustrating the delicate issue at stake, Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said a British EU exit without a deal would raise the question of planning for a possible future unification of Ireland and Northern Ireland. You might not need to plan that, and that could get very violent, what with the IRA and the Northern and Southern Irish, the Catholics and the Protestants all killing each other and whatnot. But uniting Ireland may eventually have to be a thing, and you may have to do it with using considerable amounts of force. I don't think that's something that you're going to be able to negotiate very easily. I mean, these people stopped listening to reason a long time ago. I am, of course, not speaking of the Irish in general. I'm just speaking of the religious groups fighting one another. I mean, if they were listening to reason, you'd think they would have stopped by now. I mean, if you disagree with me, then maybe your sense of reason is not very well developed. But yeah. He thinks he can get a better divorce deal by pressuring the EU, by promising there would be a no deal, but he's only going to hurt himself. He's only going to hurt his country. Keep calm, be fair. German Chancellor Angela Merkel had a telephone conversation with Johnson on Friday, and he has accepted her invitation to visit Berlin. He said the only solution that would allow us to make progress on a deal is to abolish the backstop, a spokesman for Johnson said of the call. The stance from Berlin was frank. Frankfurter. My message to the new British Prime Minister is clear. Boris, the election campaign is over. Calm yourself down. We should be fair with each other, Germany's Europe Minister Michael Roth told ZDF television. What do not help our new provocations instead? What do not? Oh, help our new provocations instead of dialogue. One must be able to expect that from the leader of a friendly nation, one that is still a member of the European Union. Ireland is crucial to any Brexit solution. Though Ireland is only about an eighth of the size of the United Kingdom's $28 trillion economy, Dublin is backed by the rest of the European Union, whose economy minus the United Kingdom is worth $15.9 trillion. While Ireland would be very badly affected by a no-deal Brexit, the relative importance of Ireland in the negotiation upends almost 1,000 years of history in which Dublin has traditionally had a much weaker hand than London. To finish this article up, and the 500-kilometer or 300-mile land border between Ireland and Britain's province of Northern Ireland has always been the biggest stumbling block for an orderly exit. Johnson told the British Parliament on Thursday he wanted to abolish the backstop, an insurance policy designed to prevent the return of border controls ended by the 1998 Good Friday Peace Agreement. The withdrawal agreement that former Prime Minister Theresa May struck in November with the EU says the United Kingdom will remain in a customs union unless and until alternative arrangements are found to avoid a hard border. But many British lawmakers oppose the prospect of being bound to EU rules and customs duties that would prevent Britain doing its own trade deals and leave it overseen by EU judges. The EU says it will not renegotiate with the withdrawal agreement or the backstop protocol within it, but could rework the political declaration sitting out post-Brexit trade terms that may offer a clearer way of avoiding the backstop. The approach that the British Prime Minister seems to now be taking is not going to be the basis of an agreement, and that's worrying for everybody, Coveney said. If he succeeds in getting his new EU deal, I imagine that it might be to most everyone's advantage if Boris Johnson could somehow negotiate a unified Ireland. I imagine that could be very violent, with lots of blood-curdling, screaming, fighting, etc., etc. Car bombs going off in the night and whatnot. But if you apply a little force to the violent forces and try to break up fights where they can, maybe employ the police on that, I think it should be able to be negotiated with relative smoothness. It would change the face of the Irish island, and in general, the United Kingdom would cease to exist as it is today. But given the nature of how Britain treats its fellow members, well, with the taxation and all, well, let's not forget what caused this bad boy behind me. It was a heavy taxation without representation. Trust me, Britain has not learned its lesson. But a unified Ireland, I think, would be probably the best move he could make in such a deal. But the question to me is, at this point, is whether or not a new Brexit deal would be made. The EU has been incredibly stubborn, and they will only allow the deal that Theresa May previously made. I think he should be a little less aggressive about it. I think he should talk it out like a civilized human being. And I think that Boris Johnson is perfectly capable of that kind of, civilized behavior. I think he's perfectly capable. It's just a matter of whether or not he'll decide to behave that way. He should, but we'll see. Anyway,